Welcome back, everyone. In this video, the dramatic conclusion to our bunged up fuel situation. Also, we went to the Arctic Ocean, but I know most of you just want to know how we got out of our sticky situation. All right, so when we left you last, we were knee deep in mud on the side of the Dempster Highway. No cell phone coverage, no way to do any research online, and no fuel pressure. So the first thing we tried, of course, is the fuel pump. We've had several pumps fail on us already, and so that was our first suspect issue. So I got out our spare pump and tried to put that in, but it had a different thread on the fuel fitting connector there. So that's when we thought we'd hitchhike into Inuvik and try and get either a pump with the correct fittings on it or some sort of an adapter where I could fit up that other fuel pump. 5 o'clock came and went, and we had no success getting me picked up. So we went back to the drawing board and bodged something together and got that fuel pump to work. The copper wire and silicone tubing patch. Well, it was good for a second, dropping again. It became clear we had a plug in a line somewhere, or our regulator wasn't regulating. So if you watch to the tail end of the last video, you can see I did check the regulator. I pulled it out and the spring was all in good shape and it was clean. And so then I went to put the original fuel pump back in because it had the correct fittings and wasn't, baler twined together and alligator clips on the electrical terminals. And as I'm laying there in the mud and the muck, guess who rolls in?
Well, we did have some people stop, which is great.
Those in the know will recognize Ben and Rebecca from His and Hers Vlogs.
Hello.
Yeah, it's great to meet up with you guys again in the North Country instead of those deserts down south.
All right, so after I had the original fuel pump back in, obviously it's a clog somewhere in the line causing suction on the pickup side. So I did shake out the fuel filters, which were very close to new. But I did shake them out and dump them into a Ziploc bag, and as you can see in this clip, they were fairly grody with a little bit of water in the one fuel separator filter, fuel water separator. But it should have been fine. It wasn't full of mud or anything, and so I put it all back together, and still no fuel pressure. And then I tried to blow in the fuel filter inlet from the tank, but I couldn't get a good enough seal because there's several holes, complicated issue. But I couldn't blow in there with compressed air. And so Ben suggested blowing compressed air in at the fuel pump, which I had tried before, but didn't realize or didn't think about it, that there's a check valve in the fuel pump that prevents fuel from flowing backward through the pump and also air. So he suggested, obviously, to blow air in before the pump at the fitting, which is what I did, and it took a little bit of pressure, and then all of a sudden it was free. So our best guess at the moment is that there's something in my tank that was plugging up the pickup, and that blew it loose. Then once we put it all back together, we put a Ziploc bag on the fuel pump outlet and collected this sample of fuel, which looks more like chocolate pudding than diesel fuel. If you'd like to see the video where Ben takes all the credit for this idea, you can click on this card up here and see his take on the story.
Pack some shit up and see how close we can get you to town.
You only fail when you fail to keep trying.
That's right.
So we got lots of great comments on the last video, people being helpful, trying to give good suggestions. Delaminated fuel tanks is a common problem on that vintage of vehicle, where the plastic liner separates from the steel tank and then plugs it up. And we knew of that already. We've replaced our steel tank with a cross-linked polyethylene tank. Some people suggested pickup strainers in the tank. We've also deleted those when we put in our fuel filters. And some people suggested that the problem was a Ford, but that's analogous to saying that you have a flat tire because you have a Toyota. And lastly, some people thought that we should have a motorcycle strapped to the back of the truck. Having a little dirt bike or a moped or even a mountain bike could have got you out of a sticky situation like that. While it is true, it might have in some situations, this road was in horrendous shape. You know, a good 4 or 5 inches of mud. And if you're a well-equipped enduro bike or a good dirt bike and you've got a full garb safety gear to go 100 kilometers in those conditions, that might have been possible. We did meet a fellow named Frank up in Tuktoyaktuk who did ride his motorcycle from Ottawa to Tuk, and he did not have the easiest ride, and so I'll splice in his clip, his opinion of that here.
Hey Jay, nice to hear from you again. Great question about the Dempster and the crazy road that was there when we were traveling up to Tuktoyaktuk. So without question, you weren't going to be riding a motorcycle or a moped up the Dempster Highway during the clay-filled, shale-soaked, wet road. They were medevacing people out of that road during the time we were there. I was very fortunate to have a motorcycle built for that kind of travel, and I had been riding a long time. So while someone could go up there on a bicycle, which everybody was stopped and not able to do because it was so bad, I would advise against doing so. I think you did the right thing. You're a brilliant man. You figured it out on your own, just took a little bit of time. But what do we have? We have lots of time. So thanks a lot for the question. I miss you guys a lot. I wish I was still on the road with you, and I hope we catch up again soon. So hello to you and your wife, and great job, man. I love following along. Good luck.
All right, so the next morning we went to Inuvik and went to Northern Industrial Supply, which is a chain of industrial supply outfits in the north. And they were surprisingly well stocked with high-end tools and equipment, Gray Tools, Milwaukee, you know, all the high-end stuff that way. And they had stock on comparable Baldwin filters, fuel water separator filter and a second finer filter. So we got 2 sets of those and replaced them, as you can see here. So fast forward a few weeks, we've gone through half a dozen tanks of fuel, and I just recently drained our water separator filter, which, as you can see, is nice and clear again, and a little bit of sediment and a little bit of water, but that's what it's supposed to filter out, so that's fine. I'm calling it good for now. We'll put a pin in it and continue on with amazing adventures. All right, so Ben and Rebecca from His and Hers Vlogs decided to stay in Inuvik an extra night and hang out. So we made them a supper of stir-fried vegetables and some panfish. And we spent the night chatting about being famous YouTubers and all the downsides that comes with being a celebrity of that caliber.
That's a good tasting little panfish. You got a little buddy here.
Children and dogs, this is what they do to bed, and they climb all over them like a drum goblin.
Unfortunately, the weather in Inuvik was super poor for the week coming up, and further north had much the same, rain and drizzle, and the condition of that road was already pretty rough and muddy, so we thought we better hunker down. So we got a campsite right in Inuvik and stocked up for the week. We went to the local store up there in the north called the Northern Store, which was surprisingly well stocked. Everything you could possibly want was available. Everything from bacon to produce to dickies to snow machines. And it was there that we met Scott. Scott actually had a pretty great story himself. He is from Colorado, and he took his canoe on the top of his Toyota Tacoma, drove it to Hay River, and then put his truck on a barge and shipped it up the river. And he took his canoe from Hay River through the Slave Lakes, all the way up the Mackenzie, right up to Inuvik, and it took him 5 weeks, and really a great story. We spent, in that week of rain, we spent many nights and many mornings having coffee with him, and it was really great to hear his story and his take on his method of travel. You know, hats off to a guy who can navigate that maze of waterways with a compass and a map by himself in a canoe for 5 weeks. So it was there we also met this fella, Matt, and he's from Quebec, and what are the odds that he's best friends with one of the guys, also named Matt, on YouTube, who I've been communicating with about his overland build. We hit it off really great and hung out for almost a week and a half afterwards, and really great guy you'll see more of later. So Inuvik is quite the remote place. Until 2 years ago, it was as far north as you could drive on the Dempster Highway, and it does have some of that remote small town vibe about it. One of the iconic things in Inuvik, of course, is the Igloo Church. This was built in the 50s completely by hand and with no blueprints at all, and lots of old buildings to see around there, lots of old stuff, but lots of new stuff too. There's a new school and RCMP building, post office, all that stuff is built more recently. And one thing they all have in common is none of these buildings are on the ground. They learned a long time ago that putting a warm building on top of a permafrost ground, it's going to heave and shift and just wreak havoc on the permafrost. So all of the buildings are up on these wooden blocks. I should say the old buildings are up on wooden blocks, and they can jack it up and add more blocks as they need to keep the buildings level. And the new buildings are on these steel pilings, and then those pilings have radiators built into them to radiate any heat out of the pilings that wants to leak down into the ground. So that's kind of neat. And all of the utilities in the area in Inuvik were all above ground. They have these utility corridors called utilidors, and their water and utilities run through there just so that they don't have heat going into the ground wrecking the permafrost. So that was kind of neat to see the challenges that a more northerly climate would face. To me anyway, that's kind of interesting stuff. So for being an older place, it does have some new infrastructure and revitalization coming into it, which is nice to see. There is a solar farm there, and I found it very interesting to find solar panels mounted vertically on the sides of apartment buildings and other big buildings. It's just no point in putting them on the roof, so they mount them vertically right on the side of the building, and satellite dishes almost look like they're pointing downward, which gives you some perspective for how far north this is. After waiting out the week of rain in Inuvik, finally north to the tundra. We set our sights on Tuktoyaktuk, which is a small hamlet right on the Arctic Ocean, and it was only about 2.5 hours more drive to Tuk. So we headed north with our new buddy Matt, and as you can see in these video clips, it's really hard to describe how much nothing can look so beautiful. The Arctic tundra was turning colors, turning oranges and yellows and reds, very beautiful. The further north we got, the more the flat tundra gave way to tens of thousands of tiny lakes, and then you started to see the pingos popping out of the ground. For those who don't know, as I didn't, pingos are these little mountain pimple-looking things that are created when water freezes under the surface of the ground and causes the ground to frost heave, and these hills or mounds or pingos start to grow out of the ground, and they make these little mountains along the Arctic coast there. So super unexciting once you know that. So at long last we arrived at the Arctic Ocean. We pulled up to the sign there, took some pictures, touched the sign, and then got out of there. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Just kidding. We spent the afternoon walking through town, checking out all they had to see. There's an old sod house, a radio station, a fur shop, and they've got old boats on display. Tuktoyaktuk is also the end of the Trans-Canada hiking trail, so they have a little monument there showing that. So it's a neat little hamlet. It feels very remote, almost foreign. It's unlike anywhere else we've been. And so we spent some time walking the streets, and everyone was very polite and kind and welcoming. There's some industrial stuff on the outskirts of town, but otherwise it feels like almost a little small fishing town, which is really neat. And so then we went to the iconic Grandma's Kitchen, which is a little food truck right on the Arctic Ocean, and they serve up your average street truck fare, like burgers and hot dogs and pizzas and chicken fingers and all that sort of stuff. But probably the only food truck that serves Muktuk, which is the traditionally prepared beluga whale skin and blubber, and they're just super tiny pieces, but we thought, when else are we ever going to try this? So we ordered up a plate of Muktuk, smoked whale meat, and then some dried whitefish. And as you can see here, some people liked it and some people didn't.
Okay. All right.
First off.
Your face isn't selling it.
It's good.
Not really.
Okay.
Wow.
What?
It's very chewy. It's like a fish flavored gummy bear.
You got her down though. I have no words.
No?
It's fishy.
Yeah.
It almost has that piece, you know, the back of a chicken, or the breastbone of a chicken where it's all cartilagey.
Yeah.
Kind of like that. Slash jello.
Do you want to have another one? That one's delicious.
Mm-hmm. A little bit fishy, but no worse than the beef jerky style. After that, we did the obligatory toe dipping in Arctic Ocean. Not nearly as cold as I would have thought, but still cold enough. And from there, we walked up the beach, kind of around the outskirts of town, along the coastline there, and got a different perspective of town from that angle, capturing some of these city skyline photos. That night we camped right next to the Arctic Ocean signpost, and we're glad to be able to do it when we did, because next year they're moving that whole campground to the south end of town, so quite a bit further away from the most northerly point. You can still drive there, of course, or walk and get your picture with the sign, but it was neat for us to be able to camp out there among the last of the people likely to be able to do that. We sat there in our chairs that night, staring off into the north, thinking about how much nothingness is out there. You know, there's not even any land under the ice cap, so that's as far north as you can get. And it was that night around the campfire we met a bunch of new best friends. Joel from Simple Overlander was there with his Jeep, and he did a video of our truck for his channel. You can click on this card here to go see that. And then Frank from Dream to Journey. He's the fellow who rode his bike from Ottawa to Tuk, and you can check him out on Instagram, Dream to Journey, and see his stories there. And Shu from Red Dog Productions, amazing, talented photographer, and you can check her out on Instagram at Red Dog Productions. And of course, Matt was still with us. He tagged along for about another week after that point, and we'll share some of that video in the next video. We're gonna have to cut this short. It's getting too long. This whole trip was supposed to be one video, and now already we're at the end of 2. Looks like it's gonna be 3. But thanks so much for hanging in there. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.